The longship moaned and creaked as it brushed against the swollen timbers of the dock. It whispered secrets to the harbor, its sea serpent prow still wet with seawater, glistening in the pale morning light. Mist curled low around the dock like spirits reluctant to leave. Above, gulls cried like small children in the wind. Canute was the first to step off the ship, boots landing on solid and slick planks. The hem of his wool cloak was stiff with dried salt and dark crust of another man's blood. Another raid survived. He stood tall, he stood proud, for on his belt a leather pouch jingled with silver, the sweet sound that could bring tears to a merchant's eyes. Behind him, a dozen warriors disembarked like those who had taken one step closer to Valhalla, bruised, boastful, and eager to celebrate at the mead hall. Back before the leaves begin to fall, Canute spoke as he exhaled a sigh of contentment. Behind him, a groan and a shuffle of three men. They slid a heavy chest off the boat, its sides carved with twisted knotwork, its belly packed with silver, crosses, goblets, and the brittle bones of a saint. A gift for the Jarl, or maybe just payment to satisfy his hunger for war. The market was already stirring. Thin threads of smoke rose from the food stalls, winding through the crisp air. The scent of spit-roasted lamb, pine wood, wet fur, and dried fish all through the market. Canute's boots splashed through the puddles as he drifted past the traders, shouting for attention of the men who carried silver. An old woman, the butcher's widow, squinting with one good eye, spoke in a hushed tone. "Back from bleeding Christians again, are you?" He stepped closer. She stood up straight. "You stink of fish and sheep guts." Canute gave a nod. "That's not the smell of slaughtered animal." Canute tossed her a silver coin, grinning. "I'll take some of that roasted meat you have there. Something red enough in the middle to remind me of the raid." "Freyr bless you," she spoke with gratitude, pocketing the coin like a sacred token. "At least you didn't try to offer me gold. I have no use for something I can only trade with the Jarl. He has nothing I need." As Canute walked, his belt sagged with silver. He could feel it in the rhythm of his stride. The pouch thumped against his hip with every step. It was stuffed with hack silver, twisted bracelets, clipped coins, and a polished ring etched with a foreign symbol. Around him, the village stretched awake. Dogs barked, ropes groaned, smoke slipped lazily through the thatched roofs. The market had found its hum. Wives laying out cured fish, farmers rolling thick turnips onto the sun-worn boards. The pulse of trade rose like the sea's tide. Canute moved through it all like a man determined who knew what he wanted, not distracted by all that he could afford but didn't need. A barefoot child darted past, skipping with laughter. The blacksmith shouted across the square, his face blackened by soot and fire. A fisherman haggled with a woman over smoked herring, and silver was exchanging hands all over the market. He paused at a trader's stall. Iron tools, weapons, carved trinkets, and glass beads from lands far east. The merchant's eyes noticed Canute's pouch. "A successful venture?" he asked, nodding at the blood and salt-stained tunic. "Successful enough," Canute responded. The man gestured to a long-handled axe laid across the cloth. "You need strong steel, not just for firewood. And maybe next time you'll need a larger pouch." Canute pulled back his cloak just enough to flash the hilt at his side. "I'm doing just fine. I took it off a man on the beach. It looks to be Frankish." The merchant said nothing. His eyes moved on, looking for the next potential customer. The sword, the stride, the silver, all of it earned Canute more than what the market had to offer. They earned him whispers. The third raid this summer. All returned, all victorious. His name was spreading. His legend was growing. Canute knew the value of silver. It was more than currency. It was access to dreams, to goals, to the pursuit of desire. The Jarl could hoard his gold, sit fat with power and pride, but Canute and the men beside him collected silver and with it honor. To Canute, gold might make a man feel like a king, but silver made a man known to his peers. It was a measure of valor, a ledger of deeds. It could be spent, traded, and weighed. It could buy food, favors, and ships. It could also earn a name that would last forever, like Canute the Unbound. By sunset, Canute pushed open the carved doors of the mead hall. 100 voices rose in laughter, and brags echoing off the blackened rafters. Shields lined the walls like crooked teeth, and a boar roasted in the center pit, sizzling as the fat dripped into the fire. Canute, the monastery's newest monk, bellowed Ivor, already half full of mead and completely full of mischief. He raised the horn and continued, "He admired every piece of gold and silver he took. He studied the relics like they were whispering his name right before he introduced their priest to Odin." Another chimed in, "I heard they need more friars now. What do you say, Canute? You'd look good in a robe. For a man who nearly met Odin on the beach, you sure talk a lot about the Christian's God," Canute muttered, dropping onto a bench. "Let's celebrate the fact that we're richer, and if we stop yapping, we can all be more drunk too. Skål! Skål!" echoed through the hall. The mead came quickly, sweet and strong, the kind that turned warriors into poets and poets into puddles. Canute drank deep, fire warming his bones. They spoke of the raid, the cursed bells of the monastery that would not stop ringing until the bell ringer was shown no mercy. They spoke of silver heaped on altars like winter snow, cold and holy, waiting for warmer hands. Canute raised the horn and looked across the table at Torvi, eyes narrowing with concern. "You almost met the Allfather in that skirmish. You'd be drinking in Asgard right now." "Forget Valhalla," snorted Torvi, a chicken leg in one hand, a horn in the other. "I'd rather feast with Freya, gold in her hair and fierce feline purring at her side." Laughter exploded. "She wouldn't have had you if you brought her Odin beard in a bucket," someone shouted. As laughter gave way to horn pounding, Canute drifted. His gaze settled on the fire. The room blurred, and voices melted into the background. "Canute, what are you over there dreaming about?" asked Seaver, leaning in with a grin. Canute leaned back and spoke, half to the flames. "A ship. I'll use my silver for a ship. It'll be fast, it'll be sharp, it'll cut through the waves. Mistbreaker, or maybe Grey Dawn. It'll find new lands fit for the sagas." There was a beat of silence, then snorting. Erling, red-faced and sharp-tongued, slammed his mug on the table. "And maybe I'll grow wings and fly to the moon." "A ship, Canute? You can't grow turnips even if you bought them full-grown from the market." "My ship will have the head of a serpent, cut through the waves, and she'll sail straighter than your tongue." Laughter roared, except for Erling, who turned volcanic. "You mocking me?" he said, rising. "No," said Canute, slow and steady. "But the mead might be." Erling staggered forward. "Say it again, and we'll see whose blood stains this floor." Canute rose, smooth as drawn steel, then flicked a silver coin to the mead maid. "Another drink for Erling. He fights better drunk than sober, and definitely talks better when he's passed out." Laughter shook the rafters. Erling, humiliated, stumbled back to his bench, grumbling. Canute stepped out into the cold. The night air cut through the mead fog. His boots found the path home without thought. His house stood humble near the woods, thatched and quiet. Before entering the night, he passed the well, then counted 100 paces east into the trees. A great oak marked the spot. He knelt and dug at loose soil with a flat stone until his fingers touched wood. The chest emerged with a grunt, buried beneath moss and earth where even the gods forget to look. Inside, coins, hack silver, a few small relics, and a single bishop's ring. He added today's share. 1 or 2 more raids, he thought. Then I'll sail. Then the crunch. Grass shifted. A dry leaf snapped. Canute wasn't alone. "You buried that silver like a squirrel, Canute." He turned. Erling, axe in hand, mead-damp tunic, fluttering like a flag of bad decisions. "Leave, Erling," Canute said. "We've won. We've drunk. Now we sleep." "I'm not here to talk," Erling growled. "You think you're better, smarter? I see that silver. That's a lot of silver." "We bled for the Jarl's gold," Canute said, "and for our own silver. I save, you spend. That's every man's choice." "How about I spend yours too?" Erling sneered, "and you take a very long nap in the ground." Moonlight kissed the blade of the axe. Canute stood slowly. He let the lid fall shut, resting his hand on the hilt of the sword taken from the beach. The blade hung hush as a reminder. Silver buys many things, but it cannot buy peace, and it never outruns greed. But what was it about silver? Why did the Norse crave it above gold, carry it across oceans, and measure their lives by its weight? To understand the value of silver, let's explore the history of the Vikings. Silver was the currency of life for the Norse. It was bread in the market, a sword on your belt, a ship on the horizon. Gold was rare. It was ornamental. It was locked away by kings. But silver moved. Silver spoke. Silver made things happen. To a Viking, gold was for glory. Silver was for survival. They craved it. They hunted it. They measured their power, their status, even their afterlife by it. But why did this metal mean everything? And perhaps more puzzling, where did it all go? Norse craved silver more than gold because silver fit the Viking soul. Gold was too clean, too polished, too distant. It belonged to kings in far-off lands, locked in chests or draped around the necks of priests. But silver was earned through sweat, blood, daring raids, and long voyages into the unknown. To the Norse, silver wasn't just currency, it was proof. Proof that you had faced danger and come back alive. Proof that you could provide for your kin, buy favor of the Jarl, or secure your place in the hall. Silver could be counted, measured, divided, and shared. A warrior might earn a silver arm ring for his bravery, a mark of honor visible to all. A farmer might save hacked pieces of silver under his floorboards, hoping to trade for cattle or a new blade come spring. And a chieftain, he might wear it layered, heavy and obvious because silver didn't whisper status, it shouted it. Even in the afterlife, silver had power. Many Viking graves contained silver rings, coins, and chains placed beside the dead. A toll for the ferryman or an offering to whatever god watched the passage from Midgard to the next world. It wasn't just wealth, it was a language. And the Vikings spoke it fluently. But there's another reason silver had such power, and one more practical, more immediate, and far more revealing. To understand that, we have to step into the marketplace. Because silver could go where swords could not. A world without centralized banks or minted national currency, the Vikings needed something that could move as quickly as they did, across borders, across languages, across loyalties. Silver was that something. It didn't matter if the piece came from Baghdad, Byzantium, or Britain. As long as it weighed true, it could be used. Coins were clipped and cut, bracelets chopped into pieces, hack silver, then weighed on small balances or scales, carried in pouches like weapons. It was immediate, it was tangible, it was trusted, and it allowed the Norse to build a vast network of raiding, trading, and tribute-taking without relying on any foreign kingdom's rules. They could sail into a port, sell furs or slaves, buy grain or weapons, and be gone before the next tide. Silver was their key to the markets, to alliances, to independence. It wasn't bound by borders. It wasn't just about convenience, because beyond the weight and the shine of silver, it carried something far more powerful, more meaningful. And that changed everything. Silver wasn't just metal to the Vikings, it was identity. Culturally, silver was how worth was shown and remembered. A man's honor could be worn on his arm. It could be worn on his finger in the form of a ring or measured by the weight he gave to his followers. Gift giving was a sacred act, a way to bind loyalty, forge alliances, and elevate status. A chieftain who gave generously in silver earned not only respect, but the loyalty of his followers, bound by oath and honor. Economically, it was the lifeblood of their world. Without a standardized coin, silver became the shared language of trade across the Norse lands and beyond. From the icy fjords of Norway to the bustling markets of Constantinople, it flowed through hands, markets and meat halls, shaping the rise and power of clans and funding the longships that craved a new future. And symbolically, silver was legacy. It was what you buried with your dead, offered to the gods, or hid beneath your home during war. It was sacred, dangerous, and alive with power. To hoard silver was to hoard destiny. To lose it was to lose everything. And that brings us back to the question that we began with. The Vikings craved silver. They earned it. They fought for it. They carried it across oceans and buried it in the earth like treasure. But if it meant so much, where did it all go? Much of the Viking silver never left the ground. Over 1,000 years later, we're still uncovering their legacy, one hoard at a time. Across Scandinavia and the British Isles, Ireland, and even Russia, archaeologists have discovered hundreds of Viking silver hoards, collections of coins, rings, armbands, and chains, often buried in haste and never recovered. Some of these finds are small, just a pouch worth, hidden beneath a longhouse floor, but others, they're legendary. Take the Galway hoard. Unearthed in Scotland in 2014, over 100 pieces of gold, silver, and silk, carefully wrapped and stashed in layers, a time capsule of Viking wealth and worldliness. Or the Curdale hoard in northern England, discovered by accident in the 1800s, over 8,600 items of silver, the second largest Viking treasure trove ever found in Europe. And then there's the Gotland finds. From the Swedish island where over 700 hoards have been discovered, suggesting that the land was not just raided but used as a Viking banking system. And many of these hoards include Arabic silver, showing just how far the Viking trade and influence reached. Some hoards were buried in times of war, others offered to the gods, and some we may never understand. And yet, from every hoard found, there are likely dozens still lost, forgotten beneath the farms, forests, and rivers, waiting for the right blade of a spade or a stroke of fate. But here's the twist. Not all of it stayed buried, because as the Vikings' power faded, their silver didn't simply, it changed hands, it changed shapes, and it changed the course of history. That leads us to the next question. How did their silver end up shaping the very world they left behind? As Viking power waned, their silver began to disappear like the mist on the morning fjord. Not lost, but absorbed, reshaped by time, trade, and transformation. Some of it was melted down, turned into coin by rising medieval kingdoms who now controlled the same lands the Vikings once raided. Silver arm rings became royal coinage. Hack silver became tax payment. What was once treasure from across the seas became the foundation of Europe's emerging money economy. In England, money became payment for protection, and these bribes of protection ended up funding castles, cathedrals, and armies. In Eastern Europe, the Vikings' trade routes along the rivers in Russia seeded wealth and fledgling cities like Novgorod and Kiev, where Norse merchants traded Arabic coins for fur, for slaves, and for influence, planting the seeds of future empires. Throughout these vast networks, surely there's still more silver that has vanished into the soils. Hoards left by these warriors who never returned, or hidden in times of desperation, but never recovered. Some believe entire treasure caches were taken by rival clans, pirates, or betrayed kinsmen. Silver swallowed by silence and treachery, but not all of it faded into oblivion. Some of that silver, glinting, tarnished, and ancient, is still being discovered today. With every find, we piece together the network and the world of the Vikings. A world where silver flowed like blood, binding cultures, kingdoms, and clans. So when you ask what happened to Viking silver and how did it influence the future after the Viking Age, the answer is it became Europe. And yet there's one final mystery, because among all the treasure that changed hands, melted, traded, and transformed, some was never meant to be found. Some was intentionally hidden, sealed away, shrouded in myth, whispered of in the sagas, and protected by curses. And the question that remains is this: what did the Vikings take with them? What were we never meant to uncover? Some treasures weren't buried in haste. They weren't meant to be found by enemy hands, by rival clans, or even by kin. They were sealed deliberately with care and ritual, tucked beneath standing stones, hidden in forest clearings only the gods remembered, laid in earth and whispered oaths of blood-bound silence. These were the true hoards, not just of silver, but of secrets. We'll never know how many lay untouched beneath our feet. But we know this: the Vikings didn't just bury wealth, they buried warnings, they buried power, and maybe, just maybe, some of them are still there. Because silver didn't just buy swords, ships, or sheep. It bought silence, fear, loyalty, memory. It was the thread that wove their world together. And the deeper we dig, the more we realize that silver wasn't just their treasure, it was their story. And speaking of stories, let's return to that fateful moment where greed again takes a life too soon. The moon hung pale and indifferent. casting long shadows across the clearing. The breeze whispered in the grass as if the gods themselves were holding their breath. Erling moved first. Of course he did. The mead burned in his blood, and the envy pushed his limbs like a puppeteer drunk on rage. He lunged. Steel rang, sparks flew. Canute caught the blow of the flat of his blade, boots skidding back in the soft earth, his knuckles screaming from the impact, but he didn't return the strike, not yet. "Stop, Erling," he growled. "You're drunk and you're stupid. It does not need to be like this. I want your silver, and there's nothing you can say to stop me." Erling spat. "I'll be rich and my honor will be legendary." "You will die in dishonor, and I will bury you without your head, and no Valkyrie will come for you. Even hell will reject this shameful act." Canute's words fell on deaf ears. Another swing, this one wild. Canute ducked and sidestepped, feeling the rush of air where the axe nearly bit. He circled, his breath steady, his resolve firm. "This is not how one gains honor," Canute said, deflecting another blow. "I'm asking you to back off, and we can sort this out tomorrow when you're sober." "Cowards! Cowards talk," Erling hissed. "You bury your treasure like a rodent." "You don't get it. I bury like a farmer plants seed," Canute replied. "For the future." Erling roared. His axe rose high, arching overhead with the fury of a man who had already lost. Canute didn't parry. He stepped in, blade grazed his side, hot, shallow, and his sword struck true and final. A gasp. Erling's axe slipped from his hands. He staggered back, his eyes wide. Then he fell to his knees. "I just wanted..." He didn't finish the sentence. Canute stepped forward and caught him as he slumped, laid him gently on the earth. The wind returned. Silence save from Canute's labored breath and the distant calls of the night birds. He knelt beside the body, blood slick on his forearms, and he muttered something, not quite a prayer, but not far from one. Words to Odin for strength and to Freya for mercy. Canute dug the grave by hand. It took half the night. Not out of duty, not from guilt, but because no man deserved to rot above the ground like a beast, no matter how he died. Canute knew the sagas. He knew what had to be done. With each strike of the axe, he shouted, not out of vengeance, but sorrow, rage, frustration that Erling hadn't listened, that he wouldn't yield. Canute used Erling's own axe to finish the burial rites, to make sure he wouldn't return as something worse than the drunken fool twisted by greed. A Draugr. Undead revenants were what the unworthy became. Those too cruel for hell, too forgotten for Valhalla. And Canute, he would not let Erling become that. So he did what the old stories required. He took the head from the body. Only then did he cover the grave with earth. And by the time the first light threatened the edge of the sky, he was home. He washed the blood from his skin in silence and returned to the chest. It waited there where he'd left it, just inside the threshold. He hoisted it onto the rough-cut table, sat down and opened it. The silver stared back, coiled and gleaming in candlelight like a serpent made of silver and fire. He added Erling's share, then paused. Thought again of what could have been. Greed is a powerful mistress, and few can resist her whisper. But Canute had enough now. Enough to take the next step toward his dream, a ship. Not for raiding, not anymore. The weight struck him, not the silver itself, but what it had cost, the stories it carried, the blood that it had cost, the friend he had buried beneath the starlight. It wasn't about riches. It wasn't even about sailing. It was about meaning, making sure it all meant something. He made arrangements for Histed, a young man and his wife, no land of their own, dreaming of raising sheep and a family. Canute gave them that chance. They would tend the soil, live beneath the thatched roof, and call it theirs. Then he went to the Jarl. The fire crackled low as Canute entered the longhouse. The Jarl blinked at the sight of him. "You've done much for this village. I appreciate the gold," he said, smirking. "And so does my wife." "I'll be leaving," Canute replied. "I'm going to buy a ship and sail to new shores." The Jarl raised his eyebrow. "Raiding season is over." "I won't raid," said Canute. I'll trade. I'll discover. I'll bring goods and stories back from foreign lands. The Jarl leaned back, contemplative. The raids bring much to our town, he said. They ensure our survival. We can't afford to lose men like you to frivolous adventures. Canute met his gaze. I understand, my lord, but I won't sail for adventure alone. I will sail to establish trade routes, ones that will benefit our people, our town. Our town can thrive without sending men to die on foreign shores. The Jarl stared long and hard. You could earn more and risk less by staying. Work for me. Canute said, I'd rather sail while there is still wind in my chest. A beat passed. Then the Jarl gave a grunt of understanding, deep and sharp. Fine. But name that vessel of yours something worthy. Canute smiled. I already have. Later that day, he visited the shipwright, paid in full. He gathered a crew. Not all were warriors. Some were traveling merchants who paid their fare, some traders with dreams of foreign-speaking markets, and one, a young boy who knew nothing but the rhythm of the waves and wind. As the crew took shape, children ran through the village, mimicking sword play with sticks. One pointed at Canute and shouted, He's the one! He's the one with the ship made of silver! Canute laughed. That night before the maiden voyage, he held a polished ring, the one from the bishop's hand. He didn't wear it. He nailed it to the prow of the ship, beneath the serpent's head. For luck, for memory, for the ones who didn't make it home. So what does it all mean for us? The Vikings didn't just fight for silver, they fought for something deeper. Legacy, the right to carve their name into the world, to build something that would last beyond the next raid, beyond the next winter. In the end, that's what Vikings were really chasing. Yes, silver bought tools and ships, but more than that, it bought respect, reputation, influence, freedom. It was practical, but it was also powerful. Silver was earned, hoarded, and won, piece by piece, blood by blood. And yet, it wasn't just about wealth, it was about what you did with it. That's what separated the legends from the common folk. The greatest hoards may have been silver, yes, but they were never just about wealth. They were about purpose, a plan for something greater. Even now, truths lie buried with undiscovered hoards across Viking worlds. The mystery of the Vikings' desires and dreams. But here's the truth I want you to hear, a hoard of wisdom uncovered in this story. If you want to awaken the heart of the Viking within you, use the silver you earn to build, to become, to move forward. Use it to sail, to live, to be full, dream, plan, save, act. It really is that simple. Maybe that's why this story resonates so deeply. You go to work, you earn your silver, you fight your battles. You've collected your victories and you carry your dreams. So don't stop. Don't stop fighting. Don't stop dreaming. Use the resources you have, however small they may feel today, and one day you'll launch from your familiar shores towards something far greater. Let silver be the tool to reach your purpose, not the chain that binds you, because silver is useful, but it's not a kind master. The Vikings remind us strength isn't just about brute force. It's about vision. It's about legacy. It's about the courage to change course when the old path no longer leads where your heart is calling. Remember, history does not reward the cautious. Gold sits on thrones, but silver builds ships, and only those who dare to sail become legend. Be bold, be strong, and awaken the Viking in you.